Hello students, Mr. Zana here. Today we're going to be going over tides in Unit 5. So we're still on investigating Earth, Sun, and Moon in Unit 5, but we're going to be going over tides today. So the what today is we're going to learn about how the Moon and Sun affect the Earth's tides. The how, well, we're going to use our ISN, and we're going to complete a worksheet, and we're also going to complete an Ed puzzle so that you can learn this concept. Why? Well, this is going to help us understand why we have high and low tides and when they occur. This will also help us understand lunar cycles that we'll be learning in, that we learned in previous lessons. You will be able to tie this into those lunar cycles. All right. So as usual, we're looking at a unit organizer. We are off a bit because of the snow day. So you'll see down here, due to the snow day, we are covering this on the 25th, 26th, instead of on the 19th, 20th, like we had originally planned, but it's no big deal. Like I told my class, this gives us more time to cover material. It also gives us more time for review at the end of the unit before you take your exam. So this is what we're doing today, the Sun and Moon's position to tide activity. So here is the second page of our unit organizer. And again, you're going to see here tides, and you're going to be able to fill in these sections here today. You're also going to be able to fill in these three vocabulary words. Okay, so we're going to deal with tide, neap tide, and spring tide. So today you will be able to know and define those three things. Also, the neap and spring tides, we're going to be putting in our ISNs today as well. So you should really have a great handle on those concepts by the end of this lesson. All right, so our champs, well, now that we're all virtual, we'll only read the virtual section. You should be able to hear the Ed puzzle and quietly working on the lesson. Please make sure you are utilizing the repeat function. If you didn't understand the question or you didn't understand the material, don't just guess at the question. Please make sure you go back and rewatch it so that you understand what the question is and what the answer is for it, okay? Help, well, please send me an email and I'll respond within 24 hours. If it's during class time, 8 to 4, I will respond as quickly as possible. Also, if you're having a tremendous amount of difficulty, I've already told my students that I'm more than happy to set up one-on-one Zoom meetings so that we can discuss it and I can actually go through the slides and explain further the concept. So if you really need help, I know Ms. Kanopik will be available as well to do the same thing if you're really struggling with this, okay? The activity is tides, position of the Sun and Moon. The movement, well, we strongly suggest standing or sitting in a safe workspace at your house, hopefully somewhere away from any distractions, any young children, siblings, cousins, whoever's staying with you, just somewhere where you can focus, okay? Participation, well, we want you answering the questions when necessary to understand the material, meaning the Ed puzzle and the worksheet. And then, yay, we'll be successful in completing and understanding tides, okay, and how the Sun and the Moon affect our tides. So here we go, tides. The Moon's pattern changes during an approximately 28-day period. These changes in position cause the tides to change here on Earth, okay? So that's the cycle that it goes through every month, okay? And for that reason, sometimes you will have what's called a blue moon, which is 2 full moons in a month. And that does not happen very often, but as you imagine with a 28-day cycle, it does happen because most of our months have 30 or 31 days in. All right, tides. These are the rise and fall of the surface levels of the Earth's oceans caused by gravitational forces of the Earth, Sun, and Moon. Okay, so gravity is involved, okay? And depending on the location of the Sun and Moon, we will have stronger gravitational pulls or weaker gravitational pulls, as we're going to learn. And that is going to cause high and low tides, but also some high tides are going to be greater or more extreme than others because of certain alignment positions with the Sun and the Moon, okay? So the changing phases of the Moon cause the change in the Earth's tides due to the Moon's gravitational pull. Now, I know what you're thinking. The Sun's so much bigger. Why isn't the Sun more involved? Well, because the Moon is closer to the Earth than the Sun. So what's happening is that even though the gravity created by the Moon is less than that of the Sun, because of its closer position, it actually affects our tides more than what the Sun will, okay? So this picture here shows you the effects of tides, okay? And it's most notable along shorelines. This is where you and I are going to notice it the most, okay? If you're out at sea, you're really not going to notice it that much because you're on the water, and if you can't see land, you're not going to really notice the rise and lowering of the tides. But if you're walking on the beach, you see here on the left the high tide, and you see where that water level is compared to that little rocky point. And then you see low tide, and you see how much further out that water is now, and how much more of that jetty or rock outcropping is exposed. Okay, so along the shoreline is where you're going to see the most change. So as the moon orbits Earth, or has a revolution, remember orbit, revolution are the same thing. So when the moon orbits Earth, the waters closest to the moon bulge outwards towards the moon because of the gravity. This is called a high tide. There is another high tide on the opposite side of the Earth at the same time, but it's not as extreme. Low tides occur in the areas opposite. So here's the moon, and so the gravitational attraction, because of the moon's proximity to the Earth, to this side of the Earth, is going to give you this really strong high tide. This other side is still going to have a high tide. It's just not going to be as strong. And then the opposite sides here and here are going to have low tides. So basically the water is getting squished like this. So it's getting pulled out to high tides on these two ends, and therefore the low tides are on the other sides of the Earth, okay? How high our tides get or how often depend on the position of the moon as it orbits or revolves around the Earth. So you've already learned about the lunar cycles, and you're going to see how those lunar cycles will affect our tides. So as the moon revolves around or orbits around Earth, depending on the position, you're going to see how it affects high tides, low tides, and what they're called, okay? So we're getting there. We're slowly building. So here you'll see we have 4 lunar phases to look at in relationship to tides. So here's the Earth in the middle, okay? And this is the moon. So if you look, we'll start at the new moon because that's usually the easiest way to start is new moon. You're going to see the new moon, okay? With the new moon, you're going to have a spring tide, okay? Because the sun is going to be over here. And when the sun and the Earth and the moon are in alignment is when you're going to have your spring tides, okay? So spring is not meaning it's in the spring. It's a terminology that's used for these tides, but it doesn't necessarily align with springtime or fall or a season. So I don't want you getting caught up in that, okay? So the new moon, you have a spring tide because, like I said, the sun is going to be located right here. So they're in alignment. So that's when you're going to have your strongest tides, which are called spring tides. So then as we rotate counterclockwise, which is the way the moon revolves or orbits the Earth, you will get the first quarter moon. And the first quarter moon is now at a 90-degree angle or a right angle from the Earth, moon, and sun. So the sun's still here. You have the Earth and the moon. So it creates a 90-degree angle or a right angle. When you have them at a right angle like that, it is what's called a neap tide, N-E-A-P, a neap tide, all right? And they're not nearly as strong as the spring tide. So then as we continue to revolve around the Earth, we're back here where we're aligned with the sun, the moon, and the Earth, and you have another spring tide, all right? And this is during the full moon. And then as we continue our revolution around the Earth, you'll see the third quarter moon is right here. And again, it's going to create that 90-degree angle or right angle with the sun here, the Earth, and the moon. And it's going to create another neap tide. And again, neap tides are not as strong as spring tides. Spring tides are much more extreme because of the alignment of the Earth, moon, and sun. Because now you have both the sun and the moon's gravitational pull on those tides in alignment. All right? So the moon's pull is strongest on the part of the Earth that's directly facing the moon. So we saw that on this last slide in this picture. See how it's nearest the moon? See how this bulge, the tidal bulge, is more on this side than this side? It's because the moon is closer to that side of Earth. So as it rotates around, so let's say this is the new moon, as it revolves, I'm sorry, not rotates, revolves around the Earth, you'll have it over here in the full moon. This tidal bulge will be larger than this tidal bulge on this side. So whichever one is closer to the moon will be the stronger or the more affected tide. All right. The moon's pull is weakest on the Earth during the first and third quarter moons. So the tides are at their lowest during this time. So back to this picture, first and third quarter moons, because they're at a right angle or a 90-degree angle with the sun, Earth, and moon, there are weakest tides. The tides in between will be stronger than them, but weaker than the spring tides. All right. So we're showing in this picture is our two strongest tides, the spring tides, and our two weakest tides, the neap tides, which are first quarter and third quarter. Okay. That's at their lowest. They're going to be at their lowest or least extreme. So when the moon is at a right angle or a 90-degree angle with the sun and Earth, we experience our neap tides. Okay. So here these pictures show a little bit better because the sun's here. Okay, that last picture didn't have the sun in it. So here's the sun, here's the Earth, there's your first quarter moon, and you see it's a right angle. They form a right angle. If you drew a line from the moon to the Earth, Earth to the sun, it's a right angle. Same way with your third quarter moon. Okay, remember, they're going to be your weakest or lowest tides. Whereas, you look at this is when the moon, sun, and Earth are all aligned. These tides, again, are called spring tides, and that's when they're all three in alignment, okay? So you have the full moon alignment and the new moon alignment. And you see the tidal bulges here. Now they're showing them as equal, but as we know from a slide before, it's the tide that is closest to the moon is going to be the highest tide out of those two spring tides. So here, it's closest to the moon. So this one will be stronger, and here, this one will be a stronger or higher tide. All right? So I like this little picture to animate it. So this illustration is showing you how the orbit or revolution of the moon around the Earth causes the spring and neap tides. So on this one, they just happen to put the sun over here. So you see the revolution of the moon, this little dot right here is the revolution of the moon. So that's a neap tide, alignment with the sun, that's the spring tide, right angle, neap tide, alignment with the sun and moon and Earth, spring tides. So as you see that going around, you can see each one of the two spring tides and the two neap tides, okay? Once a month, the moon is at its closest to the Earth. This is called perigee. So when it's closest to the Earth, what do you think? Do you think it's going to have a stronger or a weaker gravitational pull? Conversely, the moon also is at its furthest away from the Earth once a month, and this is called apogee. Apogee. So apogee is further away. So do you think this is going to be a really strong tide or maybe a little bit weaker tide than the one created by perigee when it's closest? When the moon is in perigee and is in full moon, we experience higher than normal tides. So think about it. It's a full moon, which means it's going to be aligned with the sun and the Earth. But on top of all that, it's going to be the closest it's going to get to the Earth. And the closer it gets, the more of that gravitational pull is going to be into effect. So that is going to be one of our highest tides, okay, is when we're in perigee and it's a full moon. So here you go. This is the little figure that you can look at. So apogee, and it gives you even the distance in kilometers, which you don't need to know. But here it is. It's its furthest away from the Earth, and here is where it's the closest to the Earth. So you can see just with that proximity how much greater that gravitational pull is going to be when it's in perigee opposed to apogee, okay? All right, now you need to open up your ISN. I know some of you are still struggling, either bringing it to class or even having one. So I need you to make sure that during this time frame, if you have an opportunity to go to Walmart or Walgreens, pick up your composition book. If you've lost your ISN or if you've never had one or if you're virtual and you're like, I never bothered, please get one so that you can start filling it out for the remainder of the year. It's such an important study guide, okay? So in our ISN, we are going to draw spring and neap tides. Now, my class knows I am not an artist. I tried very hard on this one, so don't be too skeptical or too rough on me about my drawing and coloring. So the top half of the page, we're going to draw our spring tide. You see we have our sun here. We have the full moon here. We have the new moon here. And you're going to see your tides, okay? So these are spring tides. So like I said, we have new moon and full moon. And if you're having trouble seeing this, you can actually click on the slide and you can actually make it a little bit bigger, or click on your screen and make it bigger. Just pause the Ed Puzzle and make it bigger. So the bottom is our neap tides. Again, we have our sun here, earth here, and as we discussed, it's going to be a right angle. The moon is going to be at a right angle from the earth and sun, okay? So we're going to have our two neap tides here with our first quarter and third quarter moons, all right? So make sure you get this into your ISN. At least get the drawings in. If you do not feel the need to color it, that is your personal preference, but you need to have this information in. If you decide to color, that's fantastic. If you don't decide to color it, please at least have the information in your ISN, okay? I'll move that over a little bit. Then we're gonna have this in our ISN as well. So now that we know what causes tides, please complete the sentence down below in your ISN. We've done this in class a few times. Those of you who are virtual should have been doing it on your own. So the STEM question starts, the strongest tides are created when the blank and blank and blank are all aligned. What three things did we discuss? That when they're all aligned, we have our strongest tides, okay? Let's make sure we get that in your ISN. Again, today, you should be able to fill out these three vocabulary words, words to know, tide, neap tide, spring tide. And you should be able to fill out this section on tides right here as well, okay? Right here. You should be able to tell what they are and fill those out and label them, okay? And the final thing is worksheet time. So make sure you open your worksheet that is assigned in Google Classroom and complete it. Hopefully you didn't try to do the worksheet before you did your Ed Puzzle, okay? If you do it in reverse order, it's just gonna make it a little bit more difficult, okay, for you to be successful on that worksheet. We don't want you frustrated. We want you to be able to have this information so that you can properly answer the questions on the worksheet. So if you have any problems, questions, concerns, if you're stuck, if you just want to talk to us, you know when we have our times. First period is, for me, 8:10. I start seeing virtually my class. Second and seventh period is 9:13. I start the half an hour session. Third and fourth period, I start at 10:53, and fifth and sixth period, I start at 1:11. And that means that it's going to be on your A or B day. All right? So until we can see you back in class, take care, be safe. Please contact us if you have any questions you have for us. Bye.